Hey guys, happy Friday and welcome to Bookstr Wellness. I'm your host, Clay S. Williams, and we have a great show for you today. I'm seated with author Laura Gassner Otting, and we're going to talk about her new book, Limitless, How to Ignore Everybody, Carve Your Own Path, and Live Your Best Life. So remember, we're getting your questions live from Facebook and or Instagram. So please send anything you want to know from our author, any feedback. We're happy to include you in the show. So Laura, let's get right into this book. What made you write this book? Where were you in the period of your life where you thought that this was essential not only for you, but also the audience that you intended to write it for?
Oh, it's such a good question. So I never planned on being an author. I never planned on being a speaker. No,
oh, wow.
no.
Okay.
4 years ago, I sold an executive search firm that I founded and built to the team of people who helped me grow it. And once I sold the business, I had this moment of, oh my God, who am I, right?
Yeah.
This like crisis of identity, this crisis of confidence. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I said yes to all sorts of things, one of which was giving a TEDx talk.
Okay.
I never wanted to be a speaker. I never wanted to be in the spotlight. It was not my comfortable space. But I got a phone call while I was driving in my car from the executive producer of TEDx Cambridge. And TEDx Cambridge is one of the big ones.
Yeah,
Right?
it's a big deal.
2,600 people, Boston Opera House, giant, theater lights. And the friend called me up and she said, would you consider doing a talk? And I said, no, hell no.
And you didn't have any experience before?
No, I mean, I'd done like workshops
Here and
and
there,
and there, but I'd never performed a talk.
Right.
And my 17-year-old, who was then 13, is sitting next to me in the car, and when I hang up the phone, and he's like, so Mom, don't you always tell me I should do things that scare me? And don't you always tell me that life starts on the other side of the fear?
Yeah.
And don't you always tell me that if it doesn't challenge me, it doesn't change me? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, so what gives, Mom?
Yeah.
So I called her back and I said yes. 6 weeks later, I'm on the stage. And I crushed it for like 11 and a half minutes. And then there's like this moment at the very end where you see me like look off stage left, and it's clear that I've completely forgotten about what I'm supposed to say.
Right.
But in that moment of being on this high wire act, I became instantly addicted. I was like, wow. Somebody laughed when I said a funny line, and somebody said yes when I said something poignant, and I want more of that.
Right.
So I started learning how to give talks, and I started speaking, and now I spend my days getting paid to speak to audiences of thousands to speak. But what I noticed was that there are a lot of people on the speaking circuit who have books. And I was like, I should get me one of those. How do I do that? So I called up a publisher, and he said, your topic seems great. We're doing a guidebook series. Your book should be part of the guidebook series. Purpose, doing work that matters.
Wow.
And I was like, okay.
Okay.
That's cool. I'll do that. But then I couldn't write a book about purpose and squeeze it all in to a guidebook series.
Right.
Yeah, because the guidebook series, right? It's
Right, right.
Chapter 1, problem solution. Chapter 2, problem solution.
Right.
Chapter 3, slit your throat, right? Like it's just boring. So I call him up and I was like, this is not working for me. I think you should fire me.
Wow. So you said that to the publisher?
And he said, yeah, I agree.
Wow.
And I went, wait, what? And he said, but I think what you have is this bigger idea, and we should publish it as a bigger idea book in the spring in hardback when big idea books come out. And I said, wait, what?
Yeah.
So then I called a friend of mine whose name is also Clay A. Bear, and I said, what am I going to do? And he said, well, how do you want people to feel after they've read the book? And I said, I'm just so frustrated by the fact that people define success by everybody else.
Right.
And everyone else's idea of what should be the thing that they should go after. And I just want them to stop being so limited by all that, because I want them just to be happy.
Right.
And he said, so you want them to be limitless? Ignore everybody, carve their own path, and live their best life?
Stop.
And I went, oh my God,
Yeah.
I love you. I don't talk to you nearly enough, but I need to hang up the phone right now and go write that book. And I hung up the phone on him, and 3 weeks later, this book became alive.
Wow.
That's the story.
That's incredible. And Laura, one thing that I find really I think difficult for a lot of people is that first part of this, how to ignore everybody. And your book definitely goes into that. Where does one go to even begin the process of okay, I need to go ahead and quiet the chatter or the negativity that other people are trying to project onto me?
And it's not even always negativity. Sometimes it's coming from a loving place. They just don't want to see you get hurt. They don't want to see you, make a mistake. They don't want to see you fail.
Okay.
So I think you have to go back to where we got. Look, we're all carrying around these scorecards in our back pockets, right? These scorecards that say, go to the right school, get the right internship, pick the right trade, marry the right person, buy the right house, wear exactly the right clothes and exactly the right size, and all that nonsense, right? Yeah. And we're all carrying around these scorecards, but none of us even know where we got them from.
Wow.
Right? So if you think about what success means to you, I had a 4th grade teacher who said, you're a really argumentative young woman. You should probably become a lawyer. And I went, oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, I argued back with her a little bit, of course.
Of course.
But then I created this path that put me in law school. And then I got to law school, and I was like, well, I don't want to be here. This isn't what I want to do. What am I thinking? So I dropped out. And I joined a presidential campaign. And on the presidential campaign, I met the man of my mother's dreams. And I started dating him. And the problem is, when I dated him, there was no spark. But he was this 6'2", nice Jewish boy, medical student, good family.
He fit the mold.
He fit the mold, right? And I would say, I just don't have a spark. And my grandmother would say, well, you just have to concentrate. But I didn't fit that definition of success either, right? And then, I had the career, and I was like fastest, youngest VP in the corner office, and everything was great. Right. But I thought I was serving my clients, and what I realized was that my boss had a definition of success that was serving the bottom line. So that didn't work either. So I had to go back to figure out not just how to ignore everybody, but who the people were who were in my ear, who were in my back pocket, who were giving me that scorecard. And once I figured that out, I was able to say, okay, well, if I don't fit into those definitions of success, then what's my definition of success? And once I figured that out, then I could surround myself with the right, I call them family, your combination of friends and family that will actually help give you the momentum to go where you want to go.
Wow. And so what was your process for trying to figure out who you were once all these different worlds sort of came tumbling down and you realized it wasn't who you were at your core?
Yeah. Well, it was that moment when I was sitting in the corner office. Okay. I was working in an executive search firm. I did only nonprofit work. And I thought we were both on the same side of the table, right? We were curing cancer, we were saving the poor, we were feeding the hungry. It was great. And I would look at my clients and I would realize that they actually saw me not on the same side of the table with them, but on the same side of the table as my boss. Oh. And my boss, the way that the search firm was created was to incentivize us to take on as many clients and do the work as fast as possible and increase the bottom line. Yeah, we wanted, the firm was created to work for nonprofits, but it was a decidedly for-profit firm. So even though mission was important, it was profits than mission. Okay. And I realized in that moment that there was a better way to do it, that I could do it with more integrity, more authenticity, better profits for us, but also less money for the clients, expenditure for the clients, and a better flexibility and home life for myself. Right. And I walked into my boss's office and I was like, I've got a great idea, like Jerry Maguire, right? And like Jerry Maguire, he was like, yeah, sounds great. We're going to keep doing it our way. So either you can keep doing it our way or you can go. And I realized that I wasn't part of the solution like I thought I was, which meant that I was part of the problem. And I couldn't live as part of the problem. So I left and I started my own firm. And that was when I was like, oh, tectonic shifts, right? There is a way to do the work that matters to me, this calling that I have, in a way that I am connected to actually being able to do it, in a way that makes sense and moves that calling forward. And it's contributing to my life by giving me flexibility, by giving me money, by manifesting my values, by giving me career trajectory. And I can have control over all of it because I can define what success and quality means. For you. For me. And so I found my personal definition of consonance in that moment. And so the book really talks about my story, but also talks about the story of many of the people I've interviewed over 20 years of doing executive search, interviewing thousands of people, and the people that I've met since, talking about how they found their moments of consonance as well. Yeah, and we were talking about this before the show actually started, about finding purpose where you work. And so a lot of companies, and we were just talking about this before, sometimes don't think that a coach like you or this work is for the kind of corporation that they have for their employees, because they're like, oh my God, if they read this and have a little bit more purpose, they're going to want to leave, that firm. What would you say to organizations who may think that or have that methodology? Yeah, well, the first thing I say is that if you think bringing me in to talk about how your employees can live their best life means they're going to leave your company, company, you should be doing some thinking about how you're running your company, right?
Yeah.
Like that in and of itself is
Break
a
that
problem,
down.
right?
Yeah.
But what we know are two things. We know, number one, that only 1/3 of the U.S. workforce actually considers themselves engaged in their work. Now, I travel every week. I'm on an airplane every week to go off and give speeches and do coaching. And so I always think about that statistic, and I like look back at the pilots, and I'm like, I sure hope they're part of this third and not those 2/3. But if you think about that with your company, and you think, well, which third are my employees in, right? If your employees are in the other 2/3, it's all going down.
Right.
So that's a problem. But we also know that engaged employees are 22% more productive and more profitable for their companies. So it behooves you to figure out how to get them to be engaged. So I go in and I say, look, we have this old scorecard of how inspirational is the leadership? How prestigious will this brand look on my resume? What kinds of skills am I going to learn? What impact am I going to make? Money, all those things that we were like, what's the value of the job when we're being recruited? But that doesn't actually retain employees. What retains them is helping them understand what their calling is, how the work is connected to it, how they're contributing to the life that they want to create through the work, and then how much control they have. And each of our employees is going to want some of those things differently. So you may have that super squeaky salesperson who, walks in and, you've given them a big fat bonus because they're doing really good work, and then 6 weeks later they're in your office with that like, what have you done for me lately face?
Right.
Or you might have like an amazing performer who blindsides you and leaves for the competition. Or you were like looking across the table in an annual review, just like thinking to yourself, like, I know somewhere in here I can find the key to unlock this person because there's more in there, but I just can't find it.
Right.
So rather than talking to our employees about the scorecard, which doesn't work, we have to talk to them about consonants so that maybe your squeakiest salesperson, you're throwing money at them, but they're still showing up in your office because what they really want to do is they want to manifest their values through their work. So putting them, in charge of your corporate philanthropy will tie them to you forever, even if you give them smaller bonuses.
Right.
We have to figure out what matters to them and speak to them in their language. And what that does then is it actually reminds them why they came to work for us in the first place, and it gets them re-engaged in the work. And for the few that it doesn't, you're better off without them anyway because they're part of the plane crash.
Yeah, and it's more meaningful for not only the company, but also for the employee. And
Exactly.
the engagement, like you were saying, is just constantly, I would say, Reenergize.
Yeah, it allows you to create an employment proposition that works for them, not for you, right? And if it's working for them, then you're going to see what you want to see out of it as well. We have one of my favorite moments in executive coaching is when the CEO calls me up and says, I just did this amazing presentation about the next 3 to 5 years of the company at our annual retreat. And nobody they just people just stared at me with glassy eyes. And I'm like, because they don't care, right? When I was the CEO of my company, I knew that my job was to be 18 to 24 months ahead of the market. I had to be figuring out solutions to the problems my clients didn't even yet know they had. My employees needed to be focused on today, this week, this month. If I was lucky, they were thinking about this quarter. So when I talked to them about 3 to 5 years, it was like Charlie Brown's teacher, like wah, 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 wah. They didn't care. They wanted to know how it affected them. So I'd walk in and I would talk to them about how the growth of the company was going to affect them. And then I'd be like, oh, and by the way, here's some details about the growth of the company you might find interesting. And suddenly they were like, oh, this pertains to me.
To me, yeah.
I'm interested
Yeah.
because it's about me.
Yeah. One of the questions that I get a lot of times around purpose work is how do I maintain the sense of calling and purpose and make money at the same time? And I know you go into that in the book. What would you say to someone who's trying to figure out their calling in life and they also are concerned about their bottom line?
Yeah. So I would say that we have this fallacy about the word purpose,
Okay.
where we think purpose has to be attached to the word higher or lofty, right? It's got to be like, I looked up the definition of the word purpose, right? I wrote a whole book about purpose. I looked up the definition to make sure I was right. And here's the definition in Webster's dictionary. The reason for which something is done.
Okay.
Period.
That's it.
That's it. There's no picture of Mother Teresa feeding the lepers in India. There's no, beautiful portrait of St. Peter with his abacus counting your good deeds. It's just the reason for which something is done. So if the reason for which you are working is that you want to save the whales, awesome. The reason for which you are working is that you want to have financial flexibility and be out of debt, because you're the first in your family to go to college, awesome. If the reason that you're working is you want to buy a Maserati and a beach house, that's awesome too.
Yeah.
I'm not going to purpose shame anyone. So there's nothing to say that if you care about curing cancer, You could prostrate yourself to the gods of poverty and go work in nonprofits. There are lots of good paying jobs in the nonprofit sector as well, I should say that. But you could make less money in the nonprofit sector and work on behalf of that. Or you could go be a partner in a hedge fund and then donate lots of money to that nonprofit.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say either one of those
Thank you
people
for
is
saying
better
that.
or worse than the other.
Right.
If you have a calling and that calling is I want to help people, there are lots of ways to do that that don't necessarily mean service being sacrifice if you're not taking the shirt off your back and, you know, feeding the poor.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think that's just the archaic definition of what we
Yes.
think, you know, in my background as a seminarian, like it's just, if you are not the suffering servant, you're
Yes.
carrying the cross on your back, you're not part of the solution.
Yeah.
And so
Well, you know the whole like nonprofit sector where it all
Yeah.
came from, right? I mean, it came from the Puritans of my home state of Massachusetts, right? Literally on the boat coming across the water. Like the Puritans cared about two things. They cared about practicing religious freedom and going to heaven, and they cared about making money. So if you're making money and you're a Puritan, it comes with this pesky guilt. And if you want to go to
Yeah.
heaven, you have to figure out what to do with the pesky guilt. So the way to go was John Winthrop, who we elected the first, second, third, eighth, 12th, I don't know, like we elected governor of Massachusetts like 40 times because guilt is good for business.
Right.
He said, charity is the penance you pay for making money, right? So it ended up that we were actually celebrating people for giving money, not necessarily for making impact. And so the whole idea of the sector came from, if I'm going to give money and it's all about sacrifice, then you should sacrifice over there too. And so the nonprofit sector became synonymous with sacrifice. So we expect people in the sector to sacrifice in a way because they're in the purpose business.
Right.
I think that's BS.
Oh my
I think
gosh.
it's ridiculous.
You are my new BFF. Thank you for that. Okay, so to our online community, I'm getting all your questions. We have one from Amy. She says, how do you think the tone and style of your voice changes while you're writing versus speaking?
Oh, that's really interesting.
Question.
Amy, I love that question. So the very best piece of advice I got before I finished handing the book in to the publisher was sit in front of your computer and read the whole book out loud. Like, don't just sit and like pretend you're reading it. Like, read the book out loud. And any sentence that's hard to read is way too complicated.
Okay.
Because I sent this book to a woman who I deeply respect, Carrie Lorenz. And Carrie was the first female F-14 fighter pilot for the U.S. Navy. She's like, if you look a badass in the dictionary,
She's that.
there is actually a picture of her, you know, in her like 6-foot frame, in her, leather dress, and she is amazing. And I met her at a dinner about a year earlier, and I was like fangirling all over her, and we were sort of connected on social media. So I reached out to her, and I was like, "Do you think maybe possibly you might like blurb my book?" Are we allowed to curse on this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Free.
Because I got to give this exact quote because it's really good and it's completely blue. I sent her the book and she calls me up about 3 days later. She's like, "Can we talk about your book for a minute?" Yeah. You're really fucking smart, and your book is really fucking good. But you're too fucking smart for your book just to be really fucking good.
Wait, say that one more time. Wow.
She said, you are really fucking smart and your book is really fucking good, but you are too fucking smart for it just to be really fucking good.
Right.
We need to make this better. You need to make it really fucking great, and then I will blurb the shit out of it.
Wow.
Boom. Hands me my ass in the nicest possible way. And then proceeds to spend the next 45 minutes. And this is 45 minutes before you go work out, before you get on stage, right? So it's like you get mic'd up in the morning, you do the sound check, you go back to your room, you get your yayas out in your workout, and then you get show pony ready, you go on stage in front of 5,000 people. So this is a really important 45 minutes in a speaker's life. She spends 45 minutes. Remember, we'd met at a dinner a year before and really weren't friends. Now we're good friends now. Because, you know, when somebody pulls you through the Rubicon, you become a friend. So she spends 45 minutes helping me figure out exactly what was wrong with the book. And what was wrong with the book is that I talked about consonants in basically every paragraph. She's like, I don't even know the word. And I'm like, I know, but I want to own it. She's like, I want to teach it. And she's like, well, you're trying to shove it down my throat and I'm choking on it.
Okay.
She said, you need to talk about the idea of it and then breadcrumb it through. She said, you need to help your readers level up their thinking without forcing them to level up their reading. Oh. Boom.
Mic
boom.
drop.
Right?
Yeah.
So when I think about speaking on stage, I think about doing the same thing, where I just try to have the same voice. I try to go up. I try to have momentum. I try to have energy. And I try to make this something that is not just a tsunami of smarts, but is actually a framework that people can use in their life.
Yeah. Laura, I love you. Okay. We have so many questions. Thank you all to our online community. We have Kyle. He says, "Are there other inspirational books that you've read that help you write Limitless?"
Oh, yeah. So
Good question.
it's a great question, Kyla. And in fact, I wrote for Bookstr an article that is like 7 badass women who I just think are incredible and who are changing the world. And so definitely check out that article. I think that there are people who are deep thinkers. And I think that there are people who are good communicators, and there are not a lot of people who are both, right? Brene Brown is somebody who is both. Amy Cuddy is somebody who is both. But then I think you have people like Jen Sincero or Rachel Hollis, who I think are not based in research, but who are they have so much moxie and so much energy that you just can't help but feel energized by them. But I'm a huge book nerd. I mean, I just finished reading Living with the Seal, Jesse Itzler, when he was living with David Goggins. Oh my God, David Goggins, before he's like known to the whole world, moves into Jesse Itzler's house for 31 days and basically forces him to like train like a seal the entire time. And it's hilarious the way that it's written. So of course, as soon as I finished that, I'm like, I gotta read David Goggins' book. I've been meaning to do it. It's amazing. And so now I'm listening to that. And I listen to these usually like when I'm working out, to pass the time. But I think if you find people who energize you, then they're probably speaking in the tone and the cadence that you like. So if that's the way that you want to communicate, surrounding yourself with people who feel like tribe members will help you, I think, to live into that energy so that when you write, it comes out in that way.
Excellent. That's such excellent feedback.
I think reading Little Women is like not going to help me write my book, even though it's an amazing book, right? Like it's not going to help me.
Yeah. All right. So Nathaniel, he says, would you want to write another book similar to Limitless or on a different topic?
So Nathaniel, I've been waking. Obviously, we were talking this right before we came on. So I always know that I'm ready to write when I wake up at 2 a.m. and the world's like tsunamiing out of me. I can't. Like you can't control when the words come.
That's right.
The words just come when they want to
come. It's like a download, inspiration. You just got to get it out.
Sometimes they come in the most inconvenient times, which is why like apps like Otter are good because you can just like dictate into them. But I've been waking up between 2 a.m, sort of perseverating over this idea of what I call wonder hell, which is I never really planned to write this book, right? It was just going to be like this little throwaway part of a guidebook so I could just feel confident that I had a book on stage. Yeah. So I'm so humbled and grateful that anybody wants to spend even 5 minutes reading or talking about a thing that I wrote. It's really wonderful. And also, I've never been so tired in my entire life. And I have 2 children who've run 3 marathons. Like, it is exhausting. It is exhausting. And it's hell, right? So I was on an airplane on a red-eye coming back from Vancouver a few weeks ago where I was one of 5 speakers. I was the 4th. The 5th was Malala, right? Small,
just little
time,
Malala.
Casual, whatever. I took a selfie with Malala the same week that my book debuted at number 2 on the Wall Street, in the Washington Post bestseller list. It was the weirdest week of my entire life. But I'm on this red eye, and it was supposed to be like a lie flat seat, really nice. At the last minute, there were mechanical problems, and so they changed the plane. So I was like bolt upright. So I just after 2 hours, I give up and I open up my laptop and I just start writing. And I was like, it's 4:28 a.m. Or maybe it's 7:28 a.m. Or maybe it's 1:28 a.m. I don't really know. But somewhere between the blur that was yesterday and the blur that will be tomorrow is the space I'm in right now. And the space I'm in right now is wonder hell. And wonder hell is the place where your ego walks in and unpacks its suitcase. And it's like, hey, guess what? You thought that this was like a nothing thing, and it turns out it has legs, and actually it has wings. You have the burden of potential.
Gotcha.
What are you going to do with it? And then you realize, okay, the burden of potential is only as big as my ego.
Right.
But actually, it turns out that my ego's pretty big. Like when people call me up and they say, I read your book and it changed my life. I heard you speak and I made these big decisions. Somebody got a tattoo of the art of the book on her arm to remind her to live in that space, right?
My gosh.
You can't get it wrong. Like you were up on stage and you're talking to people, you got to get it right.
Right.
So there's a lot of potential there. And so I realized, I want to be on Super Soul Sunday.
Amen.
I mean, I want to be like in Reese Witherspoon's book club.
Hello.
Like someone's got to be. They got to talk to somebody under the oak tree.
Yeah.
Why not me? Right. So I realized like my ego's actually pretty huge.
Right.
The burden of potential is as big as your ego, and so I'm fascinated by this idea of the who you were before you realized that you had the potential, and the who you were after when you felt the burden. And I want to write stories about people who figured out that sort of that Rubicon moment.
Right.
Who you were before, the opportunity, the Oprah moment, the diagnosis, the world catastrophe, the whatever thing it is that changed you, and who you were after.
Yeah.
And what you did with it. I think that's going to be my next book.
New York
Wonder
Times
Hell.
bestseller, right there, right there.
You heard it here first. Wonder Hell.
And speaking of that, deciding, making maybe the choice that you're going to be that part of your ego that is that bigger than life kind of thing. How do you trust that? How do you trust that voice in knowing that, this is the right move, you're enough to handle it?
You trust the voice because you know that failure is not finale. Failure is fulcrum.
Okay.
Right? So we are hired and paid and praised and promoted to live in our center of excellence. Like, do the thing you were hired to do. Step to the left, you might fail. Step to the right, you might fail. So just keep doing what you're doing until you get promoted to a place where you just can't get promoted anymore.
Right.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
that's terrible. And we're so afraid of it. But then if you think about children, like I mentioned my teenagers, I go to parent-teacher conferences and I hear over and over and over in 15-minute segments all the areas where my kids are challenged. And I could think, oh my God, they're never going to move out of the house. They're going to be in the basement forever. They're so challenged. Or I could think, oh, okay, so they figured out algebra finally. They go to geometry. You get geometry, there's trigonometry. You do trigonometry.
Right.
Oh, calculus in the house, right?
Yeah.
They iterate and they fail and they grow and they learn every single day, and that's how they do it. So I was speaking in Austin a few months ago at Renaissance Weekend, and I was doing this whole bit about how failure is not finale, it's fulcrum. And then I looked over at stage left, and there was Commander Tim Kopra of NASA, who's done not one, not two, but three
Right,
spacewalks.
right.
And I was like, failure is not finale, it's fulcrum. Except for you, sir. For you, it is most definitely failure. But for the rest of us who are walking around on planet Earth, on terra firma,
Yeah.
that's the place where we go. So you can trust the voice, because the voice is not saying you're going to do this thing. The voice is saying you're going to figure it out along the way.
Right.
And where we get confidence from is by demonstrating competence in the smaller steps. Competence, competence, competence. Oh, I have confidence now to do that.
Right. And you can trust that because of those steps.
Right. Because you know that even if you fail, that's just growth.
Yeah.
So that's okay. We're
Yeah.
redefining that. You
Yeah.
just have to own that narrative.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm trying not to hog all the questions. All right, we have so many coming in. Janet would like to know, what kind of education did you have to have this amazing career, and how did it help you, and what do you recommend to others?
I would recommend not smoking a lot of pot in college, because that's what I did, and not drinking a lot of beer in high school, because that's what I did. I am the most poorly educated, well-educated person ever. I went to a public high school in Miami
contrast.
that I had to walk through metal detectors to go into every day. I went to University of Texas and disappeared in a sea of 45,000 students. I graduated early. And I went to law school, dropped out of law school within 6 weeks, as I mentioned, because it was really the seventh circle of hell
Yeah.
for me. But even though I wasn't like book smart educated, all those experiences, I mean, I went to high school in Miami in the 80s. It was like
Okay.
Scarface was a documentary, like I learned how to roll joints. I learned how to buy weed from Rastafarians, you just learn how to be a person in the world. And so what I learned from living in this experience of an exceptionally diverse high school and going to college in Texas, where like girls wore flower dresses to the football games. I mean, that was like culture shock.
Especially made.
Yeah, in the 80s. I mean, like, literally, a guy asked me on a date to a football game the first week of school, and he gets to my dorm room, and he's like, and I open the door, and I'm wearing like University of Texas t-shirt and shorts, and he's like, oh, I'll just wait in the hallway while you get ready. And I said, what are you talking about? I'm ready.
Bro,
and then like
serious.
he's like
Yeah.
looking down, and I like look out I look like down the hallway, and all these girls are walking around like Laura Ashley threw up all over them. And I'm like, oh, I got to get that. I just like ripped the curtains down or something, wrapped it around like a toga. So I learned to observe people. And I think that education is super important. And team, my kids, if you're listening, stay in school. But I think that we also have to remember that living and traveling and meeting people that are different than you and having conversations and seeing them and paying attention. Like, those conversations you have that you just don't want them to end.
Yeah.
Like the person is endlessly interesting.
Right.
There's like a depth to them that's beautiful. Like find those people, talk to them. That's the best education of all, I think.
Wow, it's the best education of all. All right, we have Heather. She says, did you learn anything new about yourself after you finished writing Limitless?
Oh, I just wrote a blog post about this exact morning. Heather, I realized that I wrote a self-help book. And I realized that I was horrified by that. And then I realized that I was really super judgy. And actually, self-help books are awesome.
Yeah.
But I thought I wrote a careers book. I thought I wrote a business book.
Interesting.
And then people were coming up to me at conferences when I was speaking, and they were like, thank you for giving me permission to live my best life, to be the person I want to be. And I was like, I don't even say the word permission. What are you talking about? Like, you gave yourself permission. And what I realized was that, there's a thing, maybe it's like Disney or Pixar or someone who says, all stories have 4 parts, and we only give the audience 2 parts, and they have to bring the other 2 parts. And what I realized about self-help is that I can bring the help, but the people have to bring the self.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's kind of cool.
Preach,
because
yeah.
I've always thought self-help was like a bunch of like bullshit drivel Instagram memes with girls in flower crowns, like just vapid stuff.
Yeah.
And what I realized was, yeah, okay, fine, maybe that's self-help. But if there's help and there's self, like Albert Einstein said that all knowledge is experience. And I believe that's true, right? You don't really know something till you've gone through it. But I think that if all knowledge is experience, then all wisdom is framework. And what I realized is that good self-help provides not just knowledge, but provides framework so that people can see themselves in it and then do the work themselves. And so I realized that I was pretty judgy about a whole genre that I knew nothing about, but is so powerful.
Yeah, I love that, the framework. I love that. All right, we have so many questions. Thank you guys for keep them coming. Bernice wants to know, how much preparation do you do for your public speaking?
Oh, I do a lot of preparation. Yeah, so I learned that, Bernice, this is interesting. I learned that there's a difference between speaking and performing. Right? So speaking is, you get up, you have your notes, you're behind a podium, and you just like tell the audience your information. But performing, right? When you speak, you're informing. But when you're performing, you're moving. You're moving the audience to do something, to like get off their ass and change something. You want them to walk out inspired and empowered and motivated, right? Motive, like to move, right? You want them to actually do something about it. So I had to learn. Like I can't even go. Like I mentioned that TEDx talk.
Right.
I can't even watch it now because I'm like TEDx talker. I'm very earnest and I'm didactic and I'm very. And now I get on stage and I'm me.
Yeah.
So I did a whole bunch of training. I did heroic public speaking.
Okay.
Michael and Amy Port, and I've done a lot of individual training with them as well. And if anybody's thinking about speaking, check out heroic public speaking. They're truly incredible. And the last time I was there, right before the book came out, and when I knew I was going to speak on stage with Malala, and I was like, I got to up my game. I can't
like
Malala, right? It's like a big deal. I went and I tried to do the talk from the book, like, TEDx me, and Michael was like, where did you go? Like, you just disappeared. Like,
where
you're
did Laura
so
go?
funny.
Wow.
Like, where did LGO go?
Yeah.
Where are you?
Okay.
And he's like, I want to see Cocktail Party You. Cocktail Party You is funny and is full of moxie and is a badass and is like hair super awkward and that's compelling. And so I do a lot of rehearsal before I go on. So some of the throwaway lines sound like I just thought about them in the moment, but also the rehearsing allows me to feel confident in the cocktail party voice I have.
Right.
So that I can not just feel control, like I'm controlling the speaking, but I'm also controlling the silence. I land a point and then I walk across the stage and I'm okay with it.
Right.
Like good public speaking is good public silence.
I love that.
Yeah.
Good public speaking is good public silence. And so for you, how do you maintain like that sense of Laura in your public speaking? How do you keep that like at the top or forefront of your mind?
Well, I mean, this sort of goes back to the book. So I know that deep in my core that we are all just miserable, even though we are successful, right? We're like following everybody else's path to everyone else's version of everyone else's idea of success, and we're all trapped by it. It's like we're shackled by this expectation, external expectations. And so I know that I have this message that when I tell to people, they're like, oh, yeah. You're right. I am doing this thing because I had a friend or a teacher or a parent or
Right.
a boss or somebody who said you oughta, you should, you need to, or you mustn't, you can't, you're going to fail. Oh my God. And whether it was coming from a loving place or not, they still gave it to you, and you packed it in your backpack, and it
Right.
was this like little insidious thing. So I think I stay true to that core because I feel so passionately that we all have this one big, juicy, amazing life.
Yeah.
We got to get out of it everything we can. You got to like eat the world for breakfast, suck the marrow out of it.
Amen. Amen. Okay. Excuse me. Joey says, is there a specific venue or event that you spoke at that's the most memorable?
Oh, Joey, that's really. I mean, TEDx is pretty memorable because I was just more worried that I was going to vomit on myself than anything else. Good Morning America was pretty cool. The Today Show was pretty cool. Robin Roberts was, so the Malala event, there were 2 events, and then the third one, she had to take finals, so she couldn't be the 5th speaker.
That little thing, finals.
Whatever, I got a Nobel Peace Prize, I got to go take finals, sorry. So Robin Roberts was the 5th speaker, and she's always been like a shero of mine. She has lived her life out loud. She has made her message, which is her thing. And I wasn't able to see her because as soon as I got off stage, they pulled me off to go sign books. And then she was on stage, and before she got off, I had to race to the airport. So the MC gave her my book, and I wrote in it, inscribed in it, and he said, "Here you go. You need to read this. This is amazing." And a week later, she tweeted out to like millions of people, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Wow. She quoted from the book. She said, "I'm reading this super inspirational book. It's really incredible." All of a sudden, my phone starts blowing up, and someone's like, "She just quoted you on Good Morning America." And she hands the book to her producer and says, "Book her." Okay. 2 weeks earlier, junior producer at the Good Morning America is like, "Yeah, sorry, we're rejecting your press release. We're not interested."
Yeah.
So that was pretty
memorable.
Pretty amazing. Yeah. Like if I look back on the book, and if I were to say like what were the moments, right? There was my publisher realizing this was a bigger idea. There was my friend Clay making it go from purpose, doing work that matters, to limitless. How to ignore everybody, carve your own path, and live your best life. There was Carrie handing me my ass and insisting on me making it better, not letting me settle for mediocrity, right? And then there are moments like Robin Roberts telling the world, go read this book.
Go read this book. All right, we have a question from Denise. How long did it take you to write the book once you came up with the idea?
3 weeks.
You did say that. All right.
3 weeks.
3 weeks.
Yeah. But it took me 25 years and 3 weeks to come up with the book.
Okay.
But once, like, as soon as I hung up the phone from Clay, I was like, poured out of me. Completely poured out of me. So, yeah, it was 3 weeks. But it was 3 weeks because, when you're writing, and anybody in the audience who writes will know this feeling. You have this idea that's like wandering around in your mind, and it just can't find purpose. And then all of a sudden you figure out the hook. Like you figure out the way in. You're like, oh, it's actually about this part of it. And then that's where you start.
Yeah.
As soon as you get that, it's like, oh, now it's all easy. It's like I understand the whole framework of the idea. I just couldn't find the door into the house. I could see the whole house. I could look in the windows and see the furniture, but I couldn't find the door. And as soon as you find the door, for me, that's how I write.
Okay, that makes sense. It just sort of pours out from that vantage point.
I'm a fast writer, but I'm a slow thinker. It took me 25 years to come up with it. 3 weeks to write it. Yeah. So look forward to Wonder Hell in 2037. So.
All right, so a couple more questions. We have Mortuza. She wants to know, Laura, what is your favorite book of all time?
Mortuza, my favorite book is Stones from the River by Ursula Heggie. So it's a fiction book, and it's based in World War II, and it's about this little dwarf named Trudy Montag. And Trudy is basically ignored. She works as a waitress, and she's ignored by everybody because she's a dwarf. So the people they disregard her. But as a waitress, she starts hearing all the plans of like the Nazi soldiers, and she's actually able to work with the resistance and help topple Nazi Germany because she, that's like a very short version of her path. But what I love about the book is what it said to me is that we are not the definition that everybody puts on us. Like we can decide what we're going to get out of this life, and she could have just continued to just be ignored and just accepted that as her fate. or it was her fate, but because she saw that there was more in her, right? Burden of
Right,
potential,
right.
Going back to that. I haven't connected those two things before, but because she saw that and she felt this, she was actually able to change history. So I love that book. I was reading that book in the back of a bus traveling through Turkey, and I was literally like sobbing as we're driving through Cappadocia at like 10 o'clock at night, and all these Turks are like looking at me
like what has happened to you in this moment?
What's up with the liquor back there? Like, what is, I'm sobbing. Yeah.
All right, last question before we let you go. Becky wants to know, okay, good question. Can you give some advice for people that don't feel they're good at public speaking?
Yeah. Becky, what I would say is you are good at public speaking because you know how to speak and you have talked to people in public. It is something that you can do.
Yeah.
So I would not tell you to like imagine everybody in the audience is naked, right? I mean, I think that's ridiculous. I would say, what do you know that you know better than anybody else about which you are passionate, and have a framework of a way that you can explain it to somebody else, right? If I were to ask you, what is the thing that you know more than anything else, and can you talk to me for 5 minutes right now on that subject?
Right.
You could do it.
Yeah.
Right? It might not be, doing your presentation, about quarterly returns, but you could do it.
Yeah.
Right? So start doing that, practice that, and the experience of doing that and finding your voice, finding your flow.
Yeah.
Like, don't try to be everyone else. Don't try to, I had employees that used to walk into pitches and try to talk like me, and they were terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Turn off.
And it wasn't because they were bad, it was because
Right.
they weren't me. And if I tried to talk like them, I'd be bad too.
Right.
So you have to find your own voice. And the way to do that is to keep doing it and to talk about things about which you're passionate.
Yeah, and you're getting practice every day doing
Every
that.
day.
I love that because people don't make that connection. Yeah. So Laura, what is your hope for Limitless and this work that you're doing in general?
I mean, my moonshot goal is that I think it should be required reading for every college freshman. I want to be under the oak tree with Oprah. I want everybody to read this book because I want people to stop feeling so limited by everybody else's definitions of who we are and what we should be and how we should live our lives. And we should figure out not just leaning in, right? The fastest, most expedient path to the corner office being the only one that counts. I think that's ridiculous.
Right.
I want you to figure out what matters to you. What does success mean to you? And lean the hell into that instead.
Right. So what's next for you? What should we look out for?
Well, you got to find me under the oak tree, of course.
Yeah.
Oprah, call me.
Call
if
her.
you're watching. No, I think the next thing for me, I'm spending the next year really promoting this book, speaking. I'm on stages all over the place. And then I think I might sit down and write Wonder Hell.
Yeah, Wonder Hell. I love that. And where can we learn more about you? What's your social channels?
Yeah, so all my good friends call me LGO.
LGO?
So my social channels are Hey LGO, like Hey LGO. So I'm there, all the socials, and heylgo.com is my website. And if you're listening and you're like, I don't really know where to start, I actually created an assessment at limitlessassessment.com.
Oh, okay.
So limitlessassessment.com, and it takes about 15 minutes. It's kind of intense. No surprise, because
Yeah.
I'm kind of intense. Sit down,
We've met
get
you.
a cup of coffee and some pizza rolls, and really sit down and work on it.
Yeah.
And it walks you through the 4 elements of consonance: calling, connection, contribution, and control. And at the end of it, you'll get a really pretty little radar graph. We'll have one graph that shows how much of each of the 4 you have in your life, and another that we hope overlaps that shows how much you want. And where they don't overlap, you're not in consonance, and there'll be some quick tips about things that you can do today, right now, to help get you there.
Laura, thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you,
really
Clay.
appreciate
It's great.
it. Yeah, absolutely. So everyone, make sure you get this book, Limitless, How to Ignore Everybody, Carve Your Own Path, and Live Your Best Life. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Bookstr Wellness. Be sure to like, comment, and share, and we look forward to seeing you soon.